Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
The Madness Comic Network and Comic-Related Madness proudly presents Monday Madness, featuring Pops and the Richness, and indie creators from around the world. Tune in to our content on Comic Talk with Pops Van Zandt on YouTube.
First world, come in and take a seat. Pay us no attention, it's all conspiracy. We have satire and parody, some funny, some perverse. If none of it's offensive to you, you'd be the first.
ears real wide and say, "Give it to me straight, doctor, I can take it."
Kick the chocks out from under the wheels. Flaps up. No offense, Margaret. Contact. We're off. Brum, brum.
Doctor, doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you.
What heights will hit? On with the show, this is it.
The doctor is in, baby. Listen, so there was a freak accident involving popcorn and gerbils. That's all I'm going to say. And so Pops is not hosting. I'm hosting. Pops is backstage. He's producing hamsters, gerbils, and popcorn. That's all I'm going to say. He's going to come out and take my lunch money away for that. So we're going to be interviewing a very special guest today whose book promises to shake the very foundations of independent comics as we know them. And that guest, of course, is, well, me. And, you know, you say that's ridiculous to have this old fool interview himself. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bring out another old fool to do the interviewing. Please welcome to the stream, Mr. Timothy Fling.
What's up, Doc?
What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. And thanks for inviting me aboard. It is a pleasure to be here. And I can't wait to talk about Pariah, Blood and Mud.
Well, by golly, I happen to be the man with the answers for that. So we're gonna switch places here, and here we go. There we go. Now you're the host, and I'm the guest.
Wonderful, wonderful.
But I have a question for you first, Timothy.
Sure.
Why is your microphone way the hell out there and working so well?
One of the things that I've noticed in my brief podcasting career is that the farther away the microphone is, the better it duplicates in the channel.
Well, I guess I'll just have to break mine and put it over there. So, Timothy, for those that might not know you yet, and I use the word yet, tell people who you are.
My name's Timothy Fling. I'm a writer from York, Pennsylvania. I'm mostly known for an ongoing science fiction series called Water Wars 2288. And I'm also, I guess what we would call a Kickstarter creator. I'm just did my sixth, or it might be the seventh one, getting ready to launch here. But today, I don't want to talk about my book. I appreciate that very much, Doc. But today, you're the guest, man. I want to talk about you.
We're actually gonna have Timothy on the coffee shop one morning and interview him. So before we start talking about Pariah, I'm gonna play the trailer and let you have at it.
You got it.
It's a catchy little tune and you can dance to it. I'm kidding. That's the music is by some old friends of mine, the band Damnage, way back from the 80s. The first part's me and my son playing. The second part is those guys. Thank you, Steve Tuggle, as always, for letting me use it. Timothy, over to you, sir.
Well, the first thing I want to ask you, Doc, so I just now realized that you're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one too.
I'm his.
You
I
know, we've
played
talked a couple of times, and I don't think you and I ever talked about this, but there is a curious link between comic creators and musicians.
there. True story. Now, you might not know, I teach art at an art school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And what I tell people is this: if any kind of art will translate to any other art if you're willing to put in the work. I firmly believe visual artists can become musicians, musicians can become visual artists, because the learning process is the same. It's a very subjective pre-visualization thing that we all do as we develop as artists. So, yeah, lots of musicians who do visual art, including comic books.
Well, and not only that, but there's a level of, I sometimes say, when you talk about the level of preparing line art and preparing scripts and editing, it's not too different than when you're putting your band together. You know, you all get together, you learn your parts, you rehearse a couple of times, but then when the lights go up, you gotta step
Showtime,
out.
baby.
Yeah, it's showtime, baby.
Showtime, baby.
You know,
I've said the same thing. Same
yeah.
thing.
Well, and a lot of us as creators have sort of this problem, and I don't have it as much as some folks do, although I did at one point, which is we tend to delay the release of our material. Oh, it's not perfect yet. It's not perfect yet. And the reality is there comes a time, it's just like writing a song, right? You gotta raise the curtain and step out in front of the audience.
Yep. Do not let perfect be the enemy of really good.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, I hear you.
I started playing, I started drawing first, visual art first. And I had a friend in high school who he was already playing like Randy Rhoads back in high school.
Nice. I'm a huge Randy Rhoads fan. You're speaking my
Yeah,
language.
yeah. And I was always blown away by how good this guy was. So I joined the military. I'm off doing my thing. And I always wanted to play. He tried to show me one time. I couldn't even hold a bar chord. And so the wife went back home for like a week. So I snuck off to a yard sale and I bought myself a guitar and a little amp. And I came back home with a Mel Bay book and I taught myself how to tune it. And I learned how to hold a bar chord. So I noodled my way through what everybody starts with, I think, in rock and roll, Smoke on the Water.
Yep. Exactly.
I kid you not, that was on a Friday. By Sunday, I had learned like 30 songs, just bar chording my way through them. And I discovered I had the ear, the rhythm, and so 2 weeks later, I auditioned for a band. Back then I was a singer. I've lost my voice since then due to smoking. And let that be a lesson, kids. And that was a perfectly timed cough. Joined my first band 2 weeks later and started writing songs after that. And then I never looked back for about 10 years. But then, real life comes crashing in. You have to get a haircut, sell your amps, and buy a house and raise the kids,
Yep. That was my story too. If you don't mind me asking, Doc, what year roughly are we talking about?
For me, I joined the Navy in 84.
Okay.
So it was probably 85 when I started playing.
Gotcha. You're not too different than me. I joined my first band in 86.
Yeah, there you go. And we had a really great band. My last band I was in, because after that, there was nobody I wanted to jam with anymore. It was all my favorite guys in the local scene. And we fancied ourselves a version of Queensryche, really intelligent, highbrow, well constructed, songs and
pretty progressive stuff for the time.
Yeah, and loved it. But then once that ended, I was like, it didn't appeal to me anymore. Now I have jammed with people since then.
Right.
Go up on stage as a guest or go to somebody's rehearsal place. Their bass player's sick. Could I fill in? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, what instrument did you play, Timothy?
I was a bassist and I came by it honestly. Yeah, you too. My brother had been, he's kind of, and I don't like this term and I'm not even sure it's politically correct anymore, but he used to be a little bit of what they would call an idiot savant. And I mean that with all love and a little bit of humor. My meaning is he wasn't too good at any other types of things. But I think from probably about 6 or 7 years old, he was a wonder on the guitar. And what I mean by that, I can remember I must have been about 9 years old. and I could hear him in the next room playing Roundabout by Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not, the most difficult passage to play, but certainly very progressive for the time. And also to be coming out of a 7-year-old's bedroom in the morning.
Sure.
I was like, what the heck is he doing over there?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was going to college. The idea being at the time I was going to become a teacher. That never happened. But
thank God.
To the chagrin of my parents, I dropped out of college to join a touring rock band. And I did that for probably 8 or 9 years. We were a thrash band. Thrash metal was very big at the time.
Yes.
We had a couple of good gigs. We opened up for Anthrax, and I played with Wendy O and the Plasmatics stuff.
Nice. Good stuff.
Good stuff, man. But I got to the level where, since you asked, I was probably 23, 24 years old, and I still hadn't made any meaningful money. And I basically at that point, I was like, okay, look, I've either got to change gears here and try getting a job and joining the workforce, the writing was on the wall. I had to join the human race, as it were. And by the way, I'm so glad I had the experience, and wouldn't have traded it for the world. But I'm one of the fellas that never had a successful record.
Right. Me either. We got to open for some folks. We opened for Black Oak, Arkansas. Total mismatch of billing.
That's a great band, though.
They are. And we opened for Steppenwolf. And,
oh, wow.
At the old Post Office Emporium way back in the day. And the funny part was that when Steppenwolf was setting up, they were setting up their own shit. So we thought these were the roadies.
Right.
And I told one of them, hey, man, watch out for the blah, 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 blah. And he's like, all right, thanks, man. And then they came out on stage and like, oh, shit. I just down talked one of the legends. Just go somewhere and die now. Thankfully we weren't booed off the stage for being a progressive metal band, opening up for just a hard rock band.
Were you in those days writing your own material or playing covers?
Yeah, we a little bit of both, but in the very last band, the really best band I was in, we were doing mostly our own stuff.
Yeah, that's where the action is.
Yeah, and there's nothing more gratifying than seeing a bunch of long-haired people headbanging to the shit you wrote.
Right, yeah, getting into it, man.
Yeah. Now, like most bass players, I was the writer and driving force in my band. Were you also?
I was the lyricist, and I also wrote a fair share of the music. And the big inspirations for me of course, Queensryche was definitely one of the inspirations. But in those days, you'd have been talking about what I call the new wave of British heavy metal, which would have been Iron Maiden was a huge influence on me. Judas Priest was a huge influence on me. I loved Rush. I've talked to Pops about that a couple of times. All bassists inherently love Rush, right?
No, not this one.
Oh, you didn't?
No, but only because Geddy Lee's voice sounded like cancer.
It's not for everybody. I admit that to you. But, his bass lines, of course, were...
Oh, he's a master bass player.
Yeah, he did stuff that, nobody was doing. And he would play these parts, and you'd be like, what? And I remember in those days when you would do auditions for various bands, one of the things that they would sometimes say was, hey, can you play the bass solo from Free Will? Which it's one of the more complex bass parts. And to this day, I can play it because you always had to be ready in case you were auditioning.
Now, I would have people ask me the same thing. Can you play some Geddy Lee? And I'm like, no, because I detest Rush. But I can play this. So I would play some face melting stuff. And they'd go, okay.
Well, and everybody's got their... Geddy's the reason I quit playing bass. Everybody's got their contribution, right? That's the great thing about music is it doesn't... There isn't really a way to say, hey, look, you're doing it wrong. And that's one of the things I think that blends over into what we do, which is comic creating. And we're going to get to that in a second, Doc, because I want to talk about your book.
Yeah, no rush. We've got...
But I will mention to you, I had another kind of brush with greatness. And I'll tell you this, and it's going to seem kind of funny, but I was right at the line. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. This was the last half of 1987. It was just getting ready to be 1988. And there was a new band coming out, and I was great friends with a guitar player here in Pennsylvania. His name's Chris Thorne, and they went on to become the founding members of a group called Blind Melon. And do you remember that band? They had a big hit. It had the Bee Girl, which is sometimes how people remember it, and the song was called No Rain. But in those days, they were still called the Daisy Chamber, and they were a 4-piece. And Chris called me. He had just moved to L.A., And he said, "Hey, Tim, look, man, I got this new outfit. We're called the Daisy Chamber. We just got this record contract. We're going to go on tour. We're going to blah, blah, blah." And I said to him, genius that I am, I said, "Chris, I don't know, man. I just met this girl that I liked." And of course, this ended up becoming my wife, and who's now my ex-wife. And of course, we got a daughter together who I love. And look, my life turned out fine. But,
Right.
it probably wasn't even a year later, they had this hit song that literally swept the world.
Yeah.
And because if you remember, that was a real big hit at the time.
Yep.
But now, tragically, and you could say maybe I made the right decision. Tragically, that fella overdosed on drugs, probably not much more than a year after that. He was one of the casualties of, I guess it was cocaine and heroin mixed together. But that was as close as I got. And of course, I've been playing ever since. And one of the things that we still do, as you know, I'm mostly known as being a comic creator these days. But whenever I release a book, we write a theme song to accompany the release of the book. And they're themed after the works that we write. And I'd love to have you check them out. If people are so inclined, they can see that over on my YouTube channel. That's sweet. But I over on my YouTube channel, I release all of our songs in the format of it's like a music video where you page through the art of the book and the music plays over. And they do pretty well. I'm up over a couple hundred views on most of the songs, which for a guy at my level, that's pretty good.
I checked out a couple of them, and I really liked what I saw.
Oh, nice. Well, I have to mention, I kind of made it seem like it's all about me, and that's not cool. And you're going to crack up when I tell you this part, how this is done, because same as comics, the best efforts are collaborative. And I work with a songwriting partner. His name is Sterling R. Jackson. He's a very successful YouTube personality now. But what I do, are you ready for this? I make the melodies and I hum them into my iPhone, into the voice memo. And I say, "Sterling, it's going to go like this. Ba, 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 ba." And it's just my voice. And then I send it off to him and we talk a little bit. And then he makes a full, 32 track recording out of it. And they're framed along the lines, it's like a theme, like a John Williams, like a movie theme. And then it becomes a metal song because we're both metalheads,
Yes. The way we used to write in that last band I was telling you about was it didn't matter who came up with the hook, either my lead guitar player or myself. We would come up with the hook and we'd start jamming. Our drummer was one of those guys that could just fall into anything and be perfect.
Right.
Well, the singer didn't write, and he didn't play an instrument. He was just a great baritone, powerful singer,
Yeah.
So the lead guitar player would just start mumbling lyrics to a melody he was hearing in his own head. And I would sit over on a couch and write lyrics almost as fast as he was mumbling.
So that's what I want to ask. So you are actually the lyricist of this group as well. And is that Damnage you said, or was that something different?
No. This was the band Haze Gray.
Haze Gray. Gotcha.
No existing recordings that I have ever found. I know there were several videos of shows we did, but I could never find the damn things.
I would love to check that out, Doc, if you ever dig one up. But please,
if I ever do, I will.
Yeah.
And I periodically check around. Hey, I remember you were at that show and you had a camera. Oh, dude, I lost that shit years ago. Like, damn it. Excuse me, I'm going to have a coughing fit now.
That's okay. So, and I did that full time up until the late 80s and then part time for several years after that. Of course, I was working by then.
Yes.
But, comic creating came to me later in life.
Is that too loud?
No.
I had to turn my air on. It got humid in here.
Thanks for asking. That's perfect. But as far as for me, like I say, I came by comic making very late in my life. It isn't something that, to be honest with you, I look at some of the younger fellas and girls and I say, man, I wish I would have started when I was your age. I'd be cleaning it up. Because I've, thanks to guys like you and Pops Van Zant and all the great folks over at the Madness, I've been kind of lucky. I've only been doing this about 3 years or so. And I'm going to be rich today, I guess.
I'm not Pops. I'm just saying. We are distinct entities. I'm
Critical
the cool
Blast.
old guy.
Critical Blast, that's our pals over there. I think that's RJ, right?
Yeah, that's RJ. This is the thing. They call us boomers and old guys and whatever. But remember, children, we paved the way for where you are now.
Right.
Never forget it.
And
never forget that.
I realize this is
ungrateful.
a thing. This is a thing that old musicians say, but when you talk about the seminal music of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it really has not been duplicated in the 2000s and the 10s and the 20s. And I don't say that because I'm a guy shouting at the clouds. I still follow music religiously every day, and there's some great ones out there. I love Sabaton, I love Ghost, but there's not the breadth and the depth that there were, for example, in the 80s. You could have a new great band every week, just about.
Yes, that's a true story. And show me today's Randy Rhoads. Show me today's Steve Vai. Of course, he's still out there doing it.
Right? Yeah, love Steve Vai, man. Great pick.
These guys, you don't see their like coming out now, because the grunge thing in the 90s came along and said, forget all that glitz and whatever. Let's just get back to blah, 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 blah. Well, you got to remember that the powerful metal bands of the 70s and the 80s came along in response to bands just like the grunge bands that would come out on stage in flannel shirts and stare at their shoes. And
Totally
metal
agree.
bands were like, fuck that, man. I want to have a good show.
Right. Yeah.
So you got Maiden and Ozzy and Kiss and Dio.
Hey, and by the way, I wanted to bring it up. I noticed you're wearing a Kiss shirt. Can you show us a little bit which one?
It's an inaccurate shirt because it says rock and roll all night.
But it's the classic lineup, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Now I did prefer Eric Carr. He was just a better drummer.
Oh yeah, he was a great drummer, man,
and just as good of a singer, if not better. So
I saw Eric Carr live.
Yeah, me too. And I saw Kiss live probably 4 times in my life.
Yeah,
and
what a great example. And if there was ever a band that exemplified the visuals of the comic book creator, it's Kiss. And I get it that these days people can make the pretty solid point that Kiss maybe weren't the great songwriters and they didn't necessarily follow the rules a whole lot, but that's also what was cool about them, right? And the thing that I love the best, and my first one, I don't know if you remember, they had a 3-album set called Kiss Originals, and it was their first 3 albums in like a package, and it came out roughly the same time as Kiss Alive. The first live album. And of course, I'm talking now, I'm going back to the 70s, brother. That had to be what, 78, 79, probably?
Oh, it was before then. It was way before then.
Is it? Yeah, because they started, I guess, in 73.
The live one was 74 or 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that sounds about right. But I can remember bringing that album home, and this is the hallmark of rock and roll. My parents looked at that album, and I can remember my father going, "What in the hell is this?" Like you had just seen the most disgusting, reprehensible thing.
Twisted Sister video. Is that a guitar?
Right. A repulsive electric twanger. But, and I imagine it's not too different now. Hey, RJ.
Hey.
Good to see you.
RJ, what the hell are you doing on my show?
Just crashing it, man. Just crashing your show. I just want to say lyrics are not important. There's no such thing as a wango tango. Doesn't mean that, we can't like it.
Uh-oh. We've been invaded, Timothy.
I have to come in and say something real quick, and then I'm going to leave. But Peter Criss, okay? Me and my friend Mark, we went to see Peter Criss at a local bar in Phoenix after he had left Kiss in a band called Chris Cat, which actually had a really good album, and I really liked the music and stuff. So we go to see Peter Criss, right? We find it. We go really early. We snag this table that's on an elevated platform, like at the same height as the stage, so we'd be looking over all the people and we'd be able to see them just fine, right? Yeah. Maybe 40 feet from the stage. Great spot, right? We're sitting there about 30 minutes before showtime, and we're getting a little lit. We're having a good time, and these 4 dudes walk up and they stand on the railing on our dais right between us and the stage. And I looked at my buddy Mark. I said, I hope these pricks don't think they're going to be standing there when the show starts. And Peter Criss turned around and he goes, no, don't worry. We'll be over there. And I was like, oh, fuck, dude, I'm sorry. I was like, they were just looking at the stage layout, right?
You want to make sure it doesn't look right.
And dude turned around, and the other guys are like, man, you guys got the best seat in the house. And he's like, well, yeah, I got the best seat in the house.
Now, I went and saw Peter Criss with his band Balls of Fire.
He was a good dude. He was a
female lead
really
singer.
Nice guy, man.
With that female lead singer. All right. And he was funny as shit that night because he was really running the show from behind his kit. And he said, "Somebody asked me, what do you think you're doing putting that woman up front as a lead singer?" And I thought to myself, you got a better idea for a good view for a drummer?
That sounds like Peter Criss.
Yeah. RJ, what are you up to, buddy?
Oh man, I just think about you talking about music and lyrics and stuff. I was like, we had stupid lyrics. We had great music. We had stupid lyrics. Yeah, you had Elton John. I was a sculptor, but then again, no. Like, don't write it down then.
We had great lyrics too, though. I will point you toward Iron Maiden.
Yeah, man, I would buy into that.
A history lesson in every song.
Obviously written by an English major.
Bruce Springsteen just got up and looked at his grocery list. Like, got up this morning, the house was cold. Checked furnace, nope, wasn't burning.
Yep. Yeah. Listen, there have forever been dumb lyrics, and God bless them. But there's been good ones too.
But they were improving. They were English language lyrics. It wasn't like, when in the 1950s, it was like bop, 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 dip, dap, dap, zip, zip, dip, dip, woo, woo. It was like,
which I love, by the way.
Me too.
Great sound, but what's it mean? Nothing.
I got a buddy that I actually taught him to play bass, and he always gives me credit for it. God bless him. But he plays in a fairly well-known and world touring rockabilly band called what is the name of it? Hold on one second. Don't tell me I'm going to forget. I'll remember before the show's over.
Yeah, you're right.
Buford Ogletree, if you're watching, daps to you. Hot Rod Walt and the Psycho Devilles. And they tour all over the world. And he has now gotten gray beard and gray hair, but he's still slicking it back with a pompadour and getting out on stage and thumping his bass. So God bless him.
Now, one of my favorite bands, though, that did have great lyrics, and they were deep, thoughtful lyrics. I got into the Alan Parsons Project when I was in college in the late 80s. Sure. And I talked to Alan once, and I was like, "Yeah, I kept waiting for you to go on tour because I was coming out of a conservative household, not exposed to a lot of rock and roll. Here I am in college, first taste of freedom. Like, I want this to be my first concert, Alan Parsons Project." And Alan laughed like, "Yeah, what are you going to do? Watch me on stage pressing buttons and lifting levers?" Because it was all studio concept albums.
There is, by the way, speaking of that, I mentioned this on another stream last week. There is a great documentary. I don't know how long it's been out, but I only found it recently, of Thomas Dolby lecturing at a college on how he did Blinding Me with Science. And he walks through the creation of it step by step as he recreates it live until he's finally playing the whole thing live for them. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant. All right. So anyway,
I'll leave you. I just wanted to.
Hey, it was good to see you, RJ.
Oh,
same here, man.
RJ, you can absolutely stay if you want to. Doesn't bother me.
That's all right. I'm at work.
Oh, well, get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here.
I'm at work and I'm wrapping up these. So
nice.
Your favorite podcast is Critical Blast. My favorite jingle. Get out of here. All right. So what I was going to say was completely irrelevant and unimportant because I have forgotten it. Oh, no, I was going to tell you, I was talking to the chatbot thing, the AI chat that Google has.
Right.
And I typed in, finish this line, and I put quotes, screams break the silence. And it correctly came back with waking from the dead of night. Yeah. And I was like, yes. And then it went from Def Leppard's Hysteria. And I was like, no, you idiot machine. It is from Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne, written by Jakey Lee.
Yeah.
You sorry sapsucker.
A little bit of an underrated guitarist, by the way. I always thought he was great.
Jakey Lee's one of the most badass guitar players that ever lived.
But, he didn't quite get the accolades that some of the guys did back then. I don't know why. The albums were big hits.
They were. And I tell anyone who says Jakey Lee wasn't good, really, play Bark at the Moon, both solos.
Yeah, right.
Go. And I've seen a lot of people fumble through them or improvise them.
Right.
They're kind of hard to replicate.
Well, and he does a thing. Well, actually, Jakey Lee didn't do it, but somebody that's got some engineering skills, where they release it on YouTube. And what they do is they take the solos and remove all the tracks so you can only hear the solos. And it is the solo from Bark at the Moon. And man, you want to talk about some technical expertise. You can really hear it when it's just a solo. And I tell you, it holds up today, right? You hear it and you're like, oh my God, that guy was so talented. And of course, it's got that key transposition in it. And it's a terrific line.
Yes. And he's doing things to scales that shouldn't work, but they do.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, he's just phenomenal. But yeah, Bark at the Moon was and remains one of my all-time favorite albums. Of course, I'm a Randy Rhoads fan. I prefer Diary of a Madman and Blizzard of Oz are my two favorite Ozzy albums. But Bark at the Moon's right there with them.
Right.
You know, I don't want those two if I can't have that third. And Ultimate Sin was okay, like Shot in the Dark. What a freaking great song. Anyway. Gosh golly, man, I'll talk music.
Doc, listen, I could talk to you about music all day. And I will make a quick mention. Maybe that'd be a good thing for you and I to talk about over on YouTube is the top 11 solos or something like that. I'd love to hear your opinions on this.
Let's do it. I'm down for
it.
This
is something that's very interesting to me. But one of the reasons why we have you here today, not just because you're such an interesting and handsome fella, but because of course we want to talk about your book, which is Pariah, Mud and Blood.
Blood and Mud.
Blood and Mud. Thanks for correcting me. And before we get started here, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Like one is, how did you get your start into making comics?
I started in 1993 or 4. I don't remember which. I was in college, but I had also gotten rather sick. So my world was kind of touch and go there for a while. Not as far as I'm going to die, but as far as my ability to get out there in the world. And I can't stand to not be doing. So I thought, well, hell, I can draw, man. Let me, so I submitted to a bunch of the indie creators because I know I'm not ready for Marvel or DC, you know. And I got picked up by, I think, 3 different small press companies. Would you do this book for us? And one of them was an ongoing series. And I said, yeah. So I started penciling from home. And interestingly, one of my inkers was Mr. Jeff Priester. Jeff is now inking my book. As of a couple of weeks ago, I tracked him down and I said to him, I said, Jeff, you ever think about getting back in the game? He said, who said I ever left? You know, joking. He has been doing character design for cartoon shows like on the Cartoon Network or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we talked backstage and he said, look, I'll come back on board. I'll ink you. So he's inking a couple of scenes that were edit scenes in Pariah. And then I did all the rest because I didn't have an inker. Because no one works that way anymore. So,
give us more detail. What do you mean they don't work that way anymore? Tell us what you mean.
Most pencilers now ink their own work.
Oh, I see. Right. Or maybe it's digital or something.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand.
You know, I'm an archaic, I'm an anachronism, but I don't care. I'm an analog guy in a digital world, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah. I prefer it myself.
Yeah, I would greatly. As a matter of fact, when Jeff said yes, I'll come back, the pages just flowed out of me, man. I was just penciling my ass off, knowing how good Jeff is. All I got to do, I could do stick figures, send it to him, and it would come back looking great.
Well, and I think we'd probably both agree a great inker can really breathe some life into.
Oh yeah.
Now, how about, so when did you first have the idea for the Pariah book?
Well, I'll finish up the thing with, I got a little bit better physically and I went back to college, finished my degree, and I've always done art. I did my first professional work at 15 years old in art. I designed a logo for some company and was surprised that they actually pay you for this shit. So whether it was when I was in the Navy or working in mental health or medicine, which I did both, I was always producing art, and I'm an impressionist painter, an impressionist landscape painter. and I got to be fairly successful with it. I had left comic books behind to go and do my career as a counselor, but I never stopped painting. Well, the paintings began to take off right as I was thinking about early retirement because, you know, I had an IRA and, you know, I've worked hard all my life. Fuck it. You know, I want to have a life.
Yeah.
So, the art by that time was making me more money than my counseling practice. And if you want to know what counselors make, just make an appointment and ask them how much for cash visits. And that's what we make. But the art was making more. So I talked to the wife about it. She said, paint your ass off, baby. So I retired and I started painting and everything was great. Then the world ended with the COVID. That's what it was called. The world ended. And for a minute there, even in spite of that, I was still selling like gangbusters. But then it just, I couldn't give a painting away. And I had gone through a cancellation, Timothy, from the fine art community that I started here locally. I was told I was toxic masculinity and gatekeeping. I wouldn't let people vomit on canvases and call it art. Because, call me old fashioned, but that ain't art. That's a biological function. And so I was canceled. So one night I had found EVS again. Now keep in mind, EVS was just starting out when I was starting out back in comics. So I always wondered whatever happened to these guys, Cyber Frog and whatever. Now he's this big juggernaut, So I started following his channel. One night I super chatted him. And I said, Ethan, I wish there was something like Comicsgate for fine artists because I too have been canceled. Well, he went a step further. He actually looked up my website for my art and reviewed it with Artie Bear and Billy Tucci. And they oohed and they awed over the art. I was like, oh, I was so flattered. But then they said, I was kind of hoping maybe Ethan would buy a painting. But he didn't. He said, I don't know what to tell you, dude, man. Maybe just make comic books. And I went, I've done that before. I know how to do that. Yeah. So here I am.
Well, welcome.
All this time later, I'm back making books.
Yeah, and it's kind of a natural progression from the things that you have mentioned also.
It's all in the same wheelhouse. Now I'll say this. It takes some adjusting to go from, and the way I teach art, I teach my painters, back away from the canvas, arm's length, comfortable 30-degree on your arm, paint from the shoulder, hold your brush on the back, and be loose and be free. And then gradually you tighten in. Not with a comic book page, Jack.
Yeah, zoom in.
Yeah, especially when you're working traditional. I can't blow it up on a digital screen. So that took some getting used to remember how to do it. So I don't really think I found my stride for a couple of months. And then I was like, oh, I remember how to do all this now. So it got better. So, here we are. Book goes live March 3rd. Campaign goes live.
Perfect. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing this. Again, that is Pariah, Blood and Mud. Mm-hmm. And can you give us a little synopsis? What's the book about?
Certainly. And it's I run into this every time I tell it. It's a revenge story. And revenge is a common trope. If you read The Punisher, that's a revenge-driven character. Spider-Man was originally a revenge-driven character.
Exactly.
Elizabeth Payne, the main character, does not learn the lesson with great power comes great responsibility. So Elizabeth witnesses a mob hit at a place she's working as a young waitress at a strip club. She's not a stripper. She's just a waitress. Something goes wrong with her paycheck, and they tell her, go upstairs, see Mr. Fitz. He'll take care of you. So she goes upstairs and walks in on a conflict, and little dude gets killed right in front of her, and she freaks out. They give her a lot of hush money and send her on her way, pat her on the head, because they don't want two bodies to get rid of,
Right.
So she does the right thing. She goes to the police and the DA, and she goes into witness protection. Well, they find her, and she is beaten, raped, has her throat slit, left for dead. What they don't know is that she's descended from an ancient lineage of powerful witches. And witches in this case does not mean women. It just means practitioners of what I call the art. And her grandfather is the only family she's got left. That's the blood to the Blood and Mud. And he begins to teach her the art. And she just kind of surpasses his abilities. Now, what I was after with this thing, most people have heard of or seen, I Spit on Your Grave. Basically, same thing happens to the woman, and she creatively goes after and kills these people. But this is more so based on Tom Clancy's Without Remorse, wherein a Navy SEAL has his girlfriend murdered by some drug dealers, this organized drug gang. And he summed it up when he's in the hospital recovering, because they got him too. They hit him with a shotgun blast. They thought they had killed him. And he's recovering in the bed, and as he's laying there in his own mind, he says, none of their worst nightmares had they imagined somebody like me. And then he begins to effectively kill people as only a Navy SEAL can. Well, I thought, what if that happened to a witch? And that got the creative juices stirring about how would a witch get her revenge. And so we follow her arc as she goes on her quest for revenge.
Sounds cool.
So far, so good.
And can you tell us a little bit about the creative team who was all working on the book?
Me.
And how about your inker buddy? Is he with you? Or
yeah, I'm getting.
Oh.
Okay. So I'm the writer and artist, and I was a solo act, but I know enough to know what I don't know. And I don't know the first thing about crowdfunding. I don't know the first thing about fulfillment. So Anthony Romano at Dark Gift Comics is my publisher, and he's become kind of a de facto editor because he's a great sounding board. We work well together. And I have a colorist I've brought on for some of the covers and for the Black Light tapestries, and we call her just Carol. Carol is always in the chat. And Matt C is going to be doing a lot of the color covers for the book. I've also got Jim O'Reilly, the great Jim O'Reilly, is doing an alternate cover for us. And then, of course, I've got Jeff Priester doing inks at the end of this volume. But then from henceforth, I'm literally redrawing all of book 2. It's a 3-parter. So I'm redrawing all of book 2 for his inks because I want consistent inking throughout.
Good call. That sounds like a quality team you got going there.
Very, very much so.
So for now, we talked a little bit about Elizabeth Payne.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who would you say were your influences in creating this character, or is she in any way patterned after any other character, or what was the type of character that gave birth to her?
Visually, and I'll play the trailer here again in a minute, and you'll see. Visually, I crossed her between a young Jennifer Connelly, a young Alana Miles. Anybody remember the song Black Velvet and that sexy ass woman?
Sure,
her.
Of course, yeah.
I wanted her attire to be kind of a cross between Stevie Nicks and Amy Lee from Evanescence. The way she dresses, because they're a gypsy family.
Yeah.
And so,
Makes
of course,
sense.
Why wouldn't you? But in her character development, she's a lot like John Clark from Without Remorse. However, where he does not tread over the lines of morality and sanity, you're not so sure about Elizabeth. She's a little bit cracked, as one would be if you had your throat slit, and you had endured that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a particular scene in book 2 where she meets a guy, and I'm not going to reveal much about the guy, except he's able to figure out, because from the police point of view, there's a serial killer out there, and they're taking down mobsters in these horrific ways, and they can't even figure out how these things are being done, let alone who's doing them. He figures it out. They encounter one another, Elizabeth and this guy, and there's a little love affair there. And so, he tries to persuade her, just, leave the revenge thing alone. You've done enough. So she goes through a scene where she's sitting in a park and she's watching families play with their kids. And she says, I could have that. I could have a normal life. I could be happy. And then she says, no, I can't. And she just gets up and walks away. And that night, on her way stalking her next kill, she passes right by another woman going through very likely the same thing she went through, and she doesn't even notice. She's not a hero. She's not interested in helping that girl. She's only out to inflict pain. So there's that great quote that's in the book that says, revenge is the tastiest morsel to the mouth ever cooked in the kitchens of hell.
That's a good line.
And so that's kind of where she's at. She treads a thin line between sanity and morality, right, wrong, sane, and evil herself. And the question is, by book 3, does she get a redemption arc or no? We don't know.
I like the setup.
Well, Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And would you say the launch date is the 3rd?
March the 3rd.
Okay, coming up.
Yep.
We actually might both be live at the same time. Maybe we can work something out.
Yeah, I'm hoping to simul-stream the launch between Anthony's channel over at Dark Gift here on the Madness, which will include my channel and maybe on yours too.
Yeah, I would love to, man. And like I say, we'll work music into ours because I tell you, that's as you can tell, music is one of my passions.
Listen, as I'm writing this, I have a playlist on my YouTube library of pariah songs.
Yeah, okay, wait, hold on. I want to talk about that. So when you're creating, what's on your go-to playlist?
Okay, well, now that's a little bit different. And here's a weird thing. The wife pointed this out. When I paint in dead silence. I don't want anything other than the sounds of nature around me.
Okay.
Typically, I guess that comes from being a plein air painter where I go outside and I stand and I paint what's in front of me. I love that. So when I'm in the studio, same thing. But when I'm drawing, I got to have something going. So oddly enough, my workflow music is just these. If you look it up, it's whiskey blues or cigar blues or lounge blues. No vocals, just musicians playing their hearts out. And that's normally what's going. But when I think about the book, when I'm writing, I have the Shot in the Dark by Ozzy is playing. Let me see what else is on that list. It's right here in my library.
Sounds like yours is a little bit like mine.
Oh shit, it's not on this one. It's on my other YouTube channel. But yeah, I've got some Ozzy going. I've got Dio going, Rainbow in the Dark. You know,
yeah, sure.
I've got some Iron Maiden going. I've got Queensryche going. Oh, the Lady Wore Black. Come on.
Oh yeah.
You know, gotta have that one in the
early Queensryche. In fact, that might be the first Queensryche song.
That's off their first album. Yeah.
Yeah.
Queen of the Reich was their first hit.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was Lady in Black was the B-side or something.
Yeah. So yeah, I keep that stuff playing as I'm writing and creating and developing, and you know, just it paints an imagery and a mood that I'm looking for, particularly when I'm writing her.
Yeah.
She only has one scene where she shows a humanity we would recognize. When she meets this guy, they go back to his place. He says, let's get you off the street because the cops are looking and they're going to eventually track you down. So she goes back with him. Now she's young. She's only 23 years old. And he goes back with her and they're hanging out and they're having drinks. And he's kind of a Humphrey Bogart type, you know, the noir part of my book. And, he hangs his hat up and they come in and he pours her a scotch and they're sitting there drinking. And she gets a little buzzed. And so she picks his hat up and she puts it on her head and, becomes a little lighthearted and they have some banter. And then he starts talking about the morality thing and she's not going to go there. So she says to him, shut up. And she just takes her top off. She goes, I don't want to talk anymore. And he's like, yeah, okay, but we're not doing this while you're buzzed. So he casts a spell and sobers her up. She's like, what'd you do that for? And they do end up being romantically involved, but she does have a sense of humor. She ended up in that mess in the first place because like every kid, she knew more than her parental figures. Now her mom and dad are dead. Her grandfather raised her and he was going to teach her the art. But she was like, she didn't want anything to do with the family lineage and all that shit and hard work. She wanted to go to the big city and have a good time. Well, she got there and all that shit happened to her. And she ends up back on the farm with him and learning from him. But that same precociousness that every teenager has is still in her because, as we all know, adults don't grow the hell up until they get a few hard lessons. Mm. I certainly didn't. So she learns a few hard lessons, but that precociousness is still there. And the grandfather tells her, you can do this, but you can't do that. Okay. Because that's impossible to do, or it's wrong to do. Well, of course, what does she do? She's going to do those wrong and impossible things. So the blood and mud is where their power comes from. It's in their bloodline. The mud is the giant golem that the father creates to go and rescue her when she's disposed of.
Okay, sure.
And he's the protector. And she basically says, I want him. I want to either know how to make one of those or I want that one. He goes, well, you can't, only, I'm not going to give that away, but only certain circumstances can create one, and they can never be co-opted. They're always bound to the person that creates them. And she goes, well, we'll see about that shit. And she does co-opt it. And now that's her faithful servant. And you don't know about her sanity. Again, when she goes hunting, you don't know if she's really having conversations with this thing or if she's just insane, because you never hear it speak a word, but it obeys her every command.
Gotcha. And it sounds like a great premise. Who would you say is the like your target audience? Like if you like this type of book, you'd like Pariah. Who is it aimed at?
It's definitely an adult audience. This is not for kids. Just like the trailer says, TV mature audiences, If you enjoy just intense emotional gratification, revenge, embracing or walking up to that dark side of all of us, then this might be for you. If you're looking for lighthearted fare, this ain't it. If you're looking for superheroes, this ain't it. Even though I love superhero books, and I'm going to do one very soon, this ain't it. This is something I felt like there's been a lot of revenge comics, but without remorse. The level of intensity in that book, the personal intensity of the protagonist, has never been touched in any form that I've seen outside of that book. Even the movie that they did of it was terrible. It was awful. All it had in common with the book was some names. So I thought, I'm going to do that. I want to see if I can appeal to that same reader. So if you like Tom Clancy, you might like this.
Okay. It's a good setup. And I want to ask you a little bit of a deeper question, right? Because I get the sense that you got some experience with art, you got some experience with writing, music too, as we said. Why comics, right? Like first, let me make a quick statement, because I think this is true of you. And if I got any of this wrong, jump in, Doc. But when you say comics to some folks, right away they picture Batman hitting the Joker, right? Boom, right? And the reality is that's not really what most comics are, and it's certainly not what you're making. You got a little bit of a deeper experience, right? Adult themes. It's got some supernatural elements. So why comics? Why did you choose that as your medium for this story? And maybe instead of, say, a screenplay or a...
I love comics. I love the visual storytelling. I love going panel to panel and wondering where the next page is going to take me as much as a reader of a new book does. I have fond memories of working back in the day on comics. And let me tell you a funny story, Timothy. I thought in my head, this has been a year ago that I decided I would do this, and I started working. I thought, well, hell, I used to crank out a book a month. I can crank out a freaking full-size graphic novel in 3 months. No, you can't. Because I really wanted to pour my heart and soul into this, and that takes a little more time, plus me inking. But I recall, and any young creators who are watching, let me graphically lay out for you how we did it back in the day. Back in the day, before the internet, before computers were available in your home. I mean, you could get an IBM compatible whatever. There were typewriters, there were long distance phone bills, and the mail. So a script would come FedEx. You had to sign for it. You had 20 days to pencil that thing completely, get it out the door to the inker, and by the time you finished, the next script was on your desk. So it was always moving, and you lived by FedEx and long distance phone calls. And I had some great inkers I want to mention. Glenn Anderson, God bless you. Merle Fager, amazing. And of course, Jeff Priester, who's with me again now. Jeff worked in the Marvel bullpen back in the day.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so I was very blessed to have him. He's a great guy too. So anyway, that process was what was in my head when I thought about starting Pariah. It is not that at all. It is nothing like that. We have the internet. I can instantly show images to my editor. We can meet backstage on StreamYard and hold up pages and go, I want to do this. And then he can digitally edit a page for me that I've already sent him. He's got it scanned in. He's got Clip Studios. They take that line out under her lip. I don't like. We didn't have that shit back then. And you would think, Timothy, that would make everything go faster.
Not necessarily the case.
But because that technology exists, I'm like taking my time and doing this to the best of my ability every step of the way.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point there too, which is, and by the way, this is something I had to learn. As I mentioned, I didn't have any experience. And, when I started doing this, there weren't, nowadays there's like classes and things you can go to, and they teach you things like, hey, how to make a comic and how to use a crowdfunding platform. When I started, there wasn't any of that stuff, and or there may have been, and I hadn't discovered it yet.
Right.
But what I had to learn is that in my case, almost all the guys I'm the only American in my case. I sometimes work with an American letterer, but in most cases, these fellas are, there's a couple of Brazilians, there's an Argentinian. Your team. Yeah. I'm the only guy that's in the States here. Yeah. But there, like you say, there's no barriers, which I think makes it better, and you can gather more viewpoints. And in my case, and by the way, I'd like to hear what you think about this. I'd start by saying, I'm going to stick with our music theme, because now that I know you're a musician, I'm very interested in hearing your opinion about this. When you form your creative team, it's not too different than when you're forming a band. And here's what I mean by that. First, you go and you see the person's work, right? You go and see them live, as it were, and you say, oh man, I want my song to have a guitar solo like that. Or in this case, hey, I want my 9-panel page to look like his 9-panel page.
Right.
And you put your band together and you sort of practice a little bit, which is your layouts, right? But then when it gets time for the page creation, I do something a little bit different than some writer creators, in that I like to give the artist a little bit of latitude. And what I mean by that is, if you hired Eddie Van Halen to be in your band, are you an Eddie Van Halen fan?
Absolutely.
Okay. If you hired him to be in your band and you said, hey, I want you to play the solo in my song, when he got up on stage and he started playing his solo, you wouldn't stop him and say, no, I meant like this.
No.
You'd let him play, right?
Yes.
So one thing that I like to remind creators is, once you assemble your team, give them enough rope, because you chose
Trust
them.
your team.
Yeah, you chose them because of their skills. Let them exemplify their skills. And I think
let me build on that for a second.
Yeah, please do.
You've been live on stage, and there's always that time when you've been rehearsing with this band until you know each other inside and out. Me and my drummer could read each other's minds. I could just look at him and he would know I want a particular feel right here, and I would play along with him. When you go on stage for the first time with that band and the lights come up and you feel the groove happen, you go away and the music just happens. It just happens. I just happen to be standing there holding the instrument. I'm not thinking about playing or singing or any of that stuff. I'm just there in the moment. Same thing with a creative team. When it all starts coming together, it's like something bigger than you is happening.
Right. Exactly. And, you make a good point there. And maybe this is a little bit different for you because you're the writer and artist. And we'll touch on that too as we go into the next question. But, what's the right way to put this? In many cases, the artist is going to come up with his vision of what that page should be like.
Right.
And in script writing, and what I'm headed to it, I want to ask you how you make your scripts. But, generally speaking, you write out the script, and it's sort of a detailed format of what's going on in each panel. But at the top, I always put what I call the beat, right? And it says, basically, she comes into the room and she sees the dead body and she's completely surprised. And he might put a twist on that, or she, whoever your illustrator is, that, maybe it's something better and more dramatic and more effective than what the writer originally thought of. And I've got a lot of respect for that. And I think that as long as it serves the elements of the story, like, as long as she doesn't go into the room and there's like an extra guy in there, or, somebody doing bong hits, like something that didn't really fit in the story.
Right. Yeah.
I think that giving them that extra mileage, so to speak, it benefits the end creation. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I have worked both plot first and script first. I have worked with the most micromanaging writers you can imagine. They want it their way and nothing else but their way.
Right.
And I have worked with writers who I can pick up the phone and give them a call and say, hey, on page 3 of this particular scene, how about if I do this? And it's something they didn't think of. And they would go, yeah, sure, let's do it that way. When I was working back in the day in the 90s, I preferred plot first. It gave me the opportunity to be this visual storyteller.
Right.
I didn't write any books back in the 90s, but I've been writing just as long as I've been producing visual art. So I'm a pretty competent writer. And I hope people will get a sense of that in Parabola. But anyway, I remember I was working with this one guy. I'm not going to mention any names, but he was telling the backstory of a character who had been a celebrity. And he said they were scarred by a fanatical fan. And I went, I called him up. I said, you realize that's redundant because fan is short for a fanatic. And, fanatical fanatic. You just draw, monkey. I'm like,
oh,
it's your book, baby. You go ahead and put your bucket of dumb out on that page if you want to. Make it clear I'm only the artist on this book, no creative input. So, there's both ends of it, but I think a perfect team is a good writer who trusts a good penciler to interpret the writing.
Good point. And let's expand a little bit on something you said, Doc. In your case, how do I want to ask this? When you have your creation, how many pages are in Pariah?
Right now it's around 120 in three volumes.
Oh, gotcha. So this is a full-on graphic novel then. This is what I would call a graphic novel.
Yeah, eventually we'll release a hardbound perfect version on the 3rd, but we were mindful of the fact, and Anthony brought this up, my publisher, the economy's in the toilet right now. People can't afford a big layout for a big, beautiful, over 100-page book unless you're a really big name or a well-trusted known name. I'm a nobody. Nobody knows me here. I'm known in the fine art community here in Georgia, but nobody knows me in the comic book community. So we brainstormed and we said, we'll break it into 3 parts. It makes it infinitely more affordable for people to invest in an unknown.
Right.
So that's what we're doing.
Well, and so let's break this into bite-sized chunks, and I'll ask about each one. So in your first issue is going to be 40 pages.
Around 40, yeah.
Which is already, man, that's a great size book. Anything over 24 pages is what you and I would probably call a giant size in the terms of the old days.
Right.
When you're putting it together, when it's in your mind before you make anything, do you view it as a visual entity or do you write it out as a written script first? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Since I'm a Christian, I know the chicken came first. However, having said that, I see and hear the characters, and I put a lot of daydreaming into it, and I call it proactive daydreaming. I'm thinking of the whole story, and I'm creating. And I will sit very quietly in a space, and I'll drink my coffee and smoke my cigars, and the story will begin to take root. When I go to write it, I write the beats that I want to happen. If a particularly good line comes into my head of dialogue, I'll write it down. And I have built scenes around that. There's a good example of a good line popping in. The scene when she is actually being accosted, shall we say. You got to be careful with YouTube's algorithms.
I understand.
When the bad things are happening to her, it just says, but for Elizabeth, the night goes on for days. And I thought, God dang, man, that's a great line. Let me write it down. So I wrote it down, and I was able to structure the page around just that little piece of exposition. The converse to that is there's certain things that are beat for beat that I want to happen. And those are kind of the scenes that take place that are very noir looking in my book. Cause I love noir. I mean,
me too.
Maltese Falcon, Casablanca. If a story was ever told using lighting, it is Casablanca. It is the most perfect cinematographic lighting I've ever seen. Not Elizabeth, but Ilsa Lund comes in and she's glowing. She's all light. Major Strausser shows up and he's very black. Rick is always half lit, half shadow.
Yeah.
He could be black or white. You don't know. And they stay with that until the moment he takes a side and the lighting subtly changes. And he's standing in the same light that she's standing in. Now he's a good guy. Just amazing. So anyway, that heavily influences my writing to hit those beats, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And by the way, great influences. This is I'm really looking forward to your book. I think it sounds like you've got some really terrific elements built into the fabric of it.
Thank you.
And I think that when you talk about in particular some of these classic creations, what's a good way to say this? What's old is what's new. Like you have a chance here to reach a new audience that maybe is most likely haven't been exposed to some of this great lighting and the great noir techniques. And that's something we're going to do here with my next book, which people have been saying to try this. I have never done it, but we're going to release a black and white version of it, a noir edition.
Nice.
And by the way, I want to ask you, as a penciler, maybe you're a fan of this too. One of my influences when I was making things is I used to love the old Marvel magazines and the Warren magazines from the 70s. These are things like Creepy and Eerie and, of course, Vampirella. And it's something that, that's really not as, I don't know if I would say they're not as popular today. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. But I can remember, man, in the day when you would see the latest issue of Marvel Premiere come out, their oversized black and white magazine, it would probably be the best drawn, best written book.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I love that stuff. And I was the guy that would buy those instead of the Fantastic Four.
The same here, man. I 100% agree. They were more serious, for one thing.
Yeah. And I used to love, I tell everyone that I got into visual art because of two influences, George Perez and Claude Monet. Equally influenced me. Sam, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Sam.
George Perez is the reason I picked up pencils in the first place.
No kidding. Do you remember what book it was that inspired you?
The Korvac saga.
Ah, cool.
One particular scene is Iron Man is crouched down. He's using his arc reactor to cast a light on the ground where there's some footprints, and the Avengers are standing around him. I redrew that panel 1,000 times trying to get it right. I'm like, how does he do this? And I'm a little kid. I would shed the tears and wad them up until I was able to do it. And then in the 7th grade, I had an art teacher who was not a good art teacher, but she was great at teaching art history. And she talked about the Impressionists and showed me Claude Monet, and I got it. I understood it. And so those two influences have always been with me. And I remembered enough of that where now when I'm teaching art, I will quote Monet to my students, my beginners. You are not painting a flower. You are putting a pigment on a flat surface to represent a flower. So when I'm drawing, I have to remind myself, I'm not drawing a person. I'm just putting shapes down on a page to represent a person. And that gets me through any kind of blocks I have when I block on something, just draw the shapes.
It's great advice.
Monet was a genius. He said, I don't see the composition. I see a squiggle of pink over there, a blob of green here, and eventually a painting happens. Well, same thing with the pages, you just keep working and the page just develops in front of you as you go. So I don't know, different people, different approaches. I'm not what you would call an academic structurist. I'm not going to use basic shapes and lay out every single character because I can intuitively flow through some things. And then sometimes there's a swing and a miss or a noisy foul ball, that still counts as a strike. I used to call it the 5th panel curse. You do a great page and then the last panel, you F it all up. And back in the day, I had to just redraw the whole page. Now, of course, I can just do a replacement panel and they can digitally drop it in, or Anthony can, my editor. So, there's that.
I'm real curious to see now. And like I say, all the things you've said have been really interesting to me. But the fact is the fine art background in making layouts, would you say it gives you an advantage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hardcore. In all art, and all means all, and that's all that all means. So that means music, sculpture, painting, drawing. There are areas of high interest, areas at rest, visual pattern and texture and repetition.
Yeah.
There is leading the eye. And in the West, we read from left to right, top to bottom.
Right.
So your panel layouts have to flow that way. You've got to know where to do stops and where to do goes and flows and all those wonderful things. And I'm blessed that not only as a fine art creator, but as a teacher, that stuff just comes natural to me. So my page layouts I think, are pretty damn good.
Yeah.
They flow, certainly. I learned my lesson, by the way, Timothy. Again, this was when I was doing Assassinette the Mind Stalker for Pocket Change Comics, and I was following a tight script. And I would put my pages up side by side as they would look folded out, pinned up on a wall. So I could make sure that the two pages looked good together. And there was one that I came to where the bottom right panel on this side was a portrait shot of a guy talking. Well, sure as shit, on the next page, the bottom left panel was the same guy in portrait talking. Well, that's two portraits side by side talking, and that doesn't lead you up to the top. It brings you down to the bottom. So I called the writer up and I pointed this out to him and said, "Can I change that panel layout to make it work?" And for once he was, yeah, man, fix that, please. I'm like, okay. So I did. But you have to be mindful of stuff like that. Remember, pencilers, when you're doing a page, you got to remember how they look laying open next to each other.
Right. Mm-hmm. Boy, and I tell you something, that's something that writers often forget, myself included, to a level where sometimes I've had to go back and change some things.
Yeah. And that, again, that's where a good penciler helps you,
Yeah. You got to stick to that even odd ratio. That's how I always recommend it, right? It's like, oh man, make sure the action lands on the. Now, I get that some people will now say to me things like, well, that's a little different because now people are looking at it digitally, and that's something I guess I'll state for the record. No disrespect intended toward our digital readers. I love you guys. Thank you very much for backing our project.
Yes, yes.
But there is something inherently inferior to reading it, digitally on a device, as opposed to, like Doc said, holding it in your hands and looking at a 2-page spread, especially if you're the type to do, a double splash, which I kind of like those. I realize those aren't as popular lately because, you got to redo them for the digital, or at least we have in our case.
Yeah. Yeah. I only did one double page in this first part of Pariah. And I had forgotten how, Timothy. I'm like, wait a minute, do I butt here to the bleed edge? Where do I go with this thing? So I got rid of my lined paper and got 2 unlined sheets and just taped to the back and did it like back in the day.
Oh, and, wait, hold on. What do you mean by that? Tell us a little more. I'm not sure I get you.
If you're using blue lined paper, it'll say bleed edge here.
Oh yeah.
You don't know if you're supposed to cut that off and butt them together, or you don't.
I get it. Yeah.
I could not remember for the life of me how to do that, and I asked a couple of guys, including some really great artists. I don't know. So I was like, you know what? I got 2 unlined pages. I taped down the back of them, and I just drew. And I'm like, let the fucking publisher worry about it. That's what I'm paying him for.
Right. Well, and we've had situations where, because look, I love the double page splashes, and I have often tried to include them, but a number of times we've butted up against printing and publishing issues, particularly when you have to convert it back to your digital copy, because it always does one of 2 things. Either A, it'll split the image up, which is the worst. You can't have that at all. Or B, it'll shrink the image down and put it into one viewing panel. And honestly, I don't like either solution. Yeah. So what we have done in our case is we always have what they call a director's cut. One version is the digital version, which doesn't include the double page splash. And then when you get the print version, it has the double.
Yeah, I didn't even think about how this is going to work on the PDFs that we sell. I'm afraid they're just going to have to deal with whatever's there because I'm done with the pencils.
Sure. Well, they can do it pretty well. And what they do is the workaround. They take the double page splash and they shrink it down so it's viewable as one image. Yeah. So it still looks cool, but it's just not as big.
Right. A couple of weeks ago when I I sent one package up to my inker. And these were the edit scenes I had to do, because if I'm chopping my story into 3 books, there has to be 3 arcs. You cannot just do one big arc and chop it into 3. It will not work. So that required adding some scenes, expanding a scene, shrinking this scene. So that required some extra drawing. So I did all that. One package went off to my inker, and the completed pages went off to my publisher. And I went, that's it. My hands are off of it now. And it was a little scary. Like, I'm not really in control anymore at this point. It's going to be what it's going to be. But then there was a sense of relief. So I'm like, whew, okay, I can take a little break. I'm doing some pages for Rex Christian for his Grave Tales Volume 2. I did Grave Tales Volume 1 for him, and he got back to me and he wanted me to do Grave Tales 2. So I'm doing those for him. But then as soon as I finish those, I'm jumping into Volume 2 of Pariah, which is not Pariah Blood and Mud. It is Pariah Sanctum of Hate. And so I will be repenciling every single page to send them off to my inker.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a lot of work.
It is, but it isn't. It is in the sense that, yes, I'm redrawing all the scenes, but the scenes are already drawn and inked. I just want fresh inks on them, and I want my old inker to do them. So I get to just repencil and mail them out the door. I can knock out 2.5, 3 pages a day penciling that way. If I'm inking, Timothy, it slows way the hell down. It's 1 page every 2 days at best.
Yeah.
Because I am not an inker. I do the best I can. And I do a good job, I think. But I'm not an inker. I'm a penciler. And I like it that way. So I love that I have Jeff back with me. And Jeff will watch this later. He's not home from work yet. So thanks, Jeff.
Well, and let me ask you this too. So how many are there? So you're the writer and artist. You got an inker. There's 2 variant cover guys.
1 variant cover by Jim O'Reilly, the great Jim O'Reilly, amazing artist, one of my favorites. And then I have Carol coloring our black light tapestries. They're 24 by 36 black light tapestries. So it's like a poster, but it's never going to tear and it's not going to wrinkle. It's just going to hang there and do what it does.
Sure.
One is of the Golem and the other one is of Elizabeth. And then Matt C is going to be coloring the covers, both covers. And if I'm not mistaken, he's also going to color some of the trading cards. I'm not sure on that. Don't hold me to that. That's a publisher thing.
Yeah.
I'm also doing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you started to talk about the tapestries. I was going to ask you about the rewards for the campaign. What kind of things you had there?
This is where, when we launch, Anthony's going to have to be there. There's one trading card that was the original cover colored by Phil Leon, but that has become an exclusive trading card. If you sign up now and you back the book, you'll get this exclusive trading card. And there was nothing wrong with Phil's work. I'm very clear on this. I just wasn't happy with my own work on that cover being the cover. So I redrew the cover. And so, yeah. But nevertheless, it was a good piece. So we're using it as a trading card. There will be 2 black light tapestries, multiple sketch cards. I'm given to understand by Anthony, I will be drawing my ass off on sketch cards. And at this point, he's the boss because I've never run a campaign before. I don't know anything about him.
Yeah, so this is your first one then?
Yeah.
Okay.
There will be a set of trading cards. And at first, I didn't know the difference between a trading card and a sketch card. Card, draw. Okay.
Right.
I can do that. So there's those, and there's some other reward. Book 2 will have a couple of physical items in its campaign, which will be probably 6 months after we launch Pariah. We'll launch Book 2 if it's done. And that is Elizabeth's first thing she does with her power, Timothy, is the art is the art of change. So you understand what a thing is and you use your power to exert a change on it. Well, the first thing she does is she's going to change a leaf. And the first thing she does is incinerate it. And it's just ashes. And the grandfather's kind of like, interesting that the first thing you do with your power is destroy something. And he walks away. And she goes, "What does that mean?" And he says, "Interesting," and just walks away.
Hmm.
She wears a burning leaf pendant thereafter. So we're actually going to have that on the campaign, a burning leaf pendant.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
As a piece of jewelry or as a keychain if you're a guy. So
yeah. That's one of the hard things. And I thought if you'd like to, we could talk about that for a second or two, which is, we always try to find, and by the way, I don't mean to seem like I'm the expert. I'm sort of new too, but I've done a couple. Like I say, this will be number 6 or 7, I think. And
you're a pro by now.
Oh man, you're very sweet. Thank you. But I'm still trying to find the correct mix between, the reward tiers and the various cool collectibles that you can offer.
Yeah.
And how did it tie into the book? Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to sell books, you understand?
Right.
And, you want to have something cool. I'll give you for instance what I mean. One of the things we had the idea for the last campaign, which it's, some of the stories have a little bit of a military feel. It's the Water Wars. And
Nice.
We're going to make this, it's a cool military, like a marching cap, kind of like, if you know
Right.
what like a Chinese marching cap.
Mhm.
But instead of the star, it was going to have the Water Wars logo. And I'm talking to this nice lady, and the service was very good, right? And she's like, "Well, do you like, they're going through the colors, and there's different kind of embroidery, and even how much you want it to stick up, and this kind of thing, and where the seams go." And I'm maybe 20 minutes into this conversation, and I start going, "You know what, man? I'm not sure I want to be a hat maker." I didn't say that to her, of course, because look, we're all trying to find our way,
Right.
So I'd like to hear your thoughts. What is the correct, well, I guess, you're still trying to find your way, right?
Well, there's 2 things I want on the campaign as perks. I would love coffee mugs because coffee is life.
Yeah. I'm
Period.
right there with you. Right there with you, brother.
And I approve of everything Anthony has suggested so far. I would love to have a t-shirt that's just the Pariah logo because it's a cool logo. But beyond that, I'm like you, I'm not a hat maker. I'm not a coffee cup maker. I'm hawking a book here.
Right.
So I'm going to defer to people who know more than me. And that includes backers, by the way. Pops is a huge backer. I listen to his input. Shadowhawk out there. Shadowhawk is a big backer. I listen to his feedback. So there may be some bookmarks. There may be some magnets. I don't know. I don't know the difference between a perk, a tier, and an add-on. I don't.
Yeah. Well,
But
one thing I would suggest then, and by the way, I learned, when I say I learn these things, it isn't because I'm a smart fella. It's because I did it wrong a couple of times. And that's, oh man, I got to change this next time.
That's how we all learn, isn't it?
Yeah. One of mine was all the things that you offer, you also want to offer them as an add-on. Because sometimes people say, "Hey, well, I bought cover C, but I also want, 2 of the trading cards, and I also want the magnet." Okay, you basically got to break everything down so it's a little bit more like a shopping cart kind of thing.
Yes, and I hope that's what we're doing. And listen, I'm going to tell you, we'll have backstage meetings. The publisher and I, we're going over the campaign and building the campaign page, and I will just glaze over because I'm not able to wrap my brain around everything he's saying, but I trust him. I would not have hired him to be and I have hired him, by the way. He gets paid for this. I'm trusting him to do me no harm.
Yeah, right.
Do me no harm. You're a bringer of evil.
You got
All right,
it.
Pops is going to play a couple of commercials for us, Timothy, so we can go refresh our coffees.
I'll be right back.
All right, Pops, roll that beautiful bean footage for us.
I'm a setting sun, but I'll never run. I'm a dead man walking. I'm a dead man walking. I will stay and fight
America's southern border has become a war zone. Human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists flow across the Rio Grande with impunity, secure in the knowledge that no one will stop them. A distant federal government lectures Americans on their privilege while punishing overworked Border Patrol agents who were helpless to stem the tidal wave of invaders and determined migrants. Second-generation Cuban-American Marcos Zamora is a military vet, more patriotic than most Americans. No longer able to ignore the chaos at his doorstep, he acts. Joined by his best friend Gus, they hit the border every night, saving lives while stopping violent drug cartels and other opportunists. The government reacts with fury at Marcos' attempts to preserve American sovereignty, deploying the full might of their enforcement agencies. But Marcos understands that the only thing the rich and powerful fear is bad publicity, and he records every encounter. Whoever he is, this private American must be stopped. Illustrated by Richard Bonk and written by Eisner winner Mike Barron, Private American is his version of Captain America, and maybe a little Punisher, taking part in this ongoing, violent, and very real battle of good versus evil in the war for American sovereignty. Grab your copy at theprivateamerican.com.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for our administration.
I'm back. And so is Timothy.
Just getting myself a quick refill of some Java.
Always, always. Coffee is life.
So, I'm looking forward to the launch of this project, Doc. And I think that based on what we talked about, this could potentially appeal to a large audience. Do you know yet what your target goal is going to be?
Not precisely. I remember fighting with Anthony to bring it down. I'm not well enough known to expect big numbers on a first book. Hopefully by the second book, we can fund for a little more, because I've got to prove myself to people, not just the quality, but fulfillment.
Right, man. You brought up a great point, and I'm so glad that you brought this up. And I've talked to Pops about this. One of the things about Kickstarter backers, and like I say, this is in my limited experience. Your mileage may vary.
Yes, independent results may vary.
Yeah. One of the things that creators are judged by is not only the quality level of the product, which, let's be honest, that's a big one, but it's also how quickly they fulfill. And here's what I mean by that. There's a number of projects that I backed, and look, I try to support the other indie creators as often as I can.
Right.
The indie community has been great to me, and the madness and all you folks have just been terrific to me. But one of the things, if you make a project and it's a year later and the customer doesn't have that book in their hands, something's wrong. And what's going to happen is you're going to lose your following pretty quick. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I had two of them this year. One went to 18 months, 19 months, and I had to basically call the fella and keep shaking him. Hey, man. And he's somebody that we know, and it's not cool. And what I try to do is, this is just my opinion again, when I release my Kickstarters, I'm usually at what I call 75% completion, actually a little bit more than that. All art is done, and I'm either have already started the lettering or the lettering's about halfway done. Because once you've got all the art, you can sort of negotiate your way around disrupted lettering. But man, if you're waiting on pages, as we know, things happen. People get divorced, they move. A
hurricane wipes out an island.
And backers are kind of funny because remember, they've already paid, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So generally speaking, you want to try to have that book in their hands. In my case, I would say under 90 days.
I made a promise when I started this and when I announced what I was doing, that I will not go live with the campaign until everything I can do as the artist and writer is done. And it is. It's done. The lettering's got to be finished, but Anthony and I are doing that. He's doing the actual lettering digitally, but I'm right there with the script, making sure everything sounds good, looks good, flows good, working on it, and it'll be done long before the campaign is over. So yeah, everything I can do, I have done. And I feel good about that. I kept that promise. And that's going to kind of be my way forward too, is I don't intend, like you said, I don't intend to launch any product until I've done everything I can do to make the book done.
Well, and I sense that you and I are the same. And by the way, don't take this like Tim is judging someone. I don't mean it that way.
Right.
I get it that some folks, what they're doing is they're raising the money to pay their artist or to pay their people and so forth.
Right.
My way is a little different. And it's not because I'm particularly a nice guy. I'm probably not that nice of a guy.
Oh, stop.
My thing is I have too much anxiety, you see, to start taking people's money if I don't feel like the whole thing's what we call in the can.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Same.
So in my case, I pay everybody up front out of my pocket, and then I reimburse
yourself.
Yeah, myself.
Yeah, that's what it's there for.
I don't think it's right to say to your artist or your letter, well, you got to wait and see how it does, because they've effectively done the work, you see.
Yeah. The only exception I make to that is if there's a creative team and you're in it together and you're both going to wait for the funding, cool. But if I'm going to hire somebody, then it's a done deal, you know.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, you have that obligation to those backers to do as much as you possibly can do to make it good and to make it done.
And Doc, I'll bet you money based on what you've told me that what you're going to see from book 1, 2, and 3, it is 3 total, correct?
Correct.
You're going to see they're going to return for number 2, and the number's going to go up. Then they're going to return for 3, and then it's going. Well, yeah. So
I hope so. I certainly hope so.
The people who back number 1, you want to make sure that, like, and this is again one man's opinion, but you want to make sure that they go, wow, Doc hooked me up. I'm special. I contributed to the project. He cares about my $10, whatever it is. Yep. And so I have people that, like, my number 1 category now is returning backers.
And that's the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. This is not going to make or break me personally. Yeah. I can go back there, take that drawing board off my easel, put the easel back up and paint. And I can do one painting for more money than this whole campaign is going to generate. And I can knock out 5 paintings a week.
Right.
But I want to tell a really good story, and I want to share that story with people. And this is the format that I love. So I really want to share this story with people, and I'm willing to invest the work in it. And I hope that in return, they're willing to invest a couple of dollars in it.
Well, and I think your passion is really shining through here. And I think it's particularly cool that you are the writer and artist, because I think that, you know, many times the end product from writer artist people it's a terrific product. And
Sure.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. As the writer and the artist, I have no one to blame but myself.
Yeah. That's it's like comedy, right? At least if you're terrible at it, no one will be laughing at you.
You know, I think it comes from a lot of that comes from, I've always worked for me. Once I got out of the military, I worked for me. As a counselor, I own my own practice. Yes, I would contract with different agencies, but I worked for me. So I used to tell everyone that, you know, my boss was a jerk, but my employee was lazy. So, you know, it all balanced out. But I'm all of those things. I do think I ended up working for my secretary there toward the end, though. I'm pretty sure. And by the way, I apologize to her frequently. Kira, if you're listening, you were right about this chair. Because when I sold my practice, I sold everything that went with it except a few things. And one of them was my secretary's chair. My chair wouldn't fit under this desk. She always complained about this chair. It's not comfortable. That chair is fine. Can I have a new chair? No. This chair is horribly uncomfortable. I'm very sorry. I should have gotten you a new chair. Please accept my apologies.
Well, and you know, I think that you represented well too your creative team, and it's great to have a publisher too. I think that's a smart thing that you did. I became the publisher accidentally, Doc. I actually never had that dream that it's something I wanted to do, but
right.
As you know, in 2023, if you want to make your book, just go ahead and make it. There's nobody holding you back. And
right, exactly.
You know, the sky's the limit, especially with the crowdfunding platforms. Like, I've never had any big. I'm not what they call a 5-figure guy.
Right.
Oh, and that reminds me, one of the questions I want to ask you. You know, some people say, and I don't have a belief on this, I don't know the answer, but some people say, hey, what you do is you set the goal really low. That way you're guaranteed to fund, and also that'll help your algorithm because you'll be X percentage over your goal. Maybe you'll get better results. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've heard it. I don't know that it's true, but I've been shadow banned. So it's not going to much matter to the algorithm what I do.
What do you mean by shadow banned? Or I mean, I know what it means, but please expand on that.
I have been shadow banned on Indiegogo, which means my product is in their store, but it's hidden in the storage room, and you have to know it's there and go back and ask for it.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you it's there, and they're not going to put it out front. I don't know why, because it's just in sign up right now. But I have been shadow banned, which means when you go to Indiegogo and you search for my product, you will not find it. But if you have the link, it is there and you can go to it. So, Pops, if you would drop that link, I'd appreciate it. You know, I can tell you this, and I ranted about this a good little bit. There's two things. One is, obviously, they're not shadow banning the product because they haven't seen the product. So they're shadow banning the person. And the only way they would have done that is to go on my social media and discover that I'm not one of the foo-foo people. You know, I'm a conservative. I'm a Reagan Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I lived through Jimmy Carter, period.
Yeah.
But I don't bring my politics into my comics. I'm not ramming an agenda down anyone's throat. But obviously, the current theory is, because I'm one of many that have been shadow banned, that some activist has gotten into their trust and safety team and is shadow banning different campaigns. Well, I'm one of them.
Yeah, I have heard about this, and it's a shame. You know, I can tell you that. And first of all, I'm like you. I don't bring politics into my work at all. I write about robots, for God's sakes.
Right, right.
But I'm very cognizant of what type of project seems to get special attention, and it would be very fair to say it's not something I would be interested in.
Thank you.
I'll
Agreed.
leave it at that. Yeah.
And we'll both leave it at that, but I agree 100%.
But I think your product looks terrific. And hey, let me ask you this: if this becomes a huge hit, which, man, I am praying to the comic gods, I hope it does. Do you have any? What would be the next step for Pariah? This is going to be an animated series, a movie. What's the?
Oh, you know, if someone wanted to make a movie out of it, that'd be great. Or you know, I wouldn't care as long as they didn't do the Netflix treatment on it.
They probably will, man.
You know, what I know is going to happen is her story, Elizabeth's story arc, is one and done. But there are a couple of characters in that universe that will have their own spinoff book.
You could do the Pariah verse.
Well, she's the pariah, so once she's gone, she's gone.
Okay.
But we don't know if she's ridden off into the sunset. Does she die? Does she explode? We don't know. I'm not going to give any spoilers. But there are two characters that I already have stories developed for that are in the book, and we will spin them off. Actually, there's three. And one of them's really damn interesting. I'm debating on which one I want to do first. But there's also, Timothy, there was, and they've been copyrighted and trademarked since the 90s. I have a superhero universe that has existed that's I think got something to offer that's both nostalgic value, as in good, solid superhero stories, but also visually really appealing, that I would like to do. But at the same time, there's a public domain character out there, the Heap, that I would love to do.
Oh, I love the Heap. Sure.
A book, The Heap.
Yeah.
I love swamp monsters.
You said it faster than I could. I am a huge swamp monster fan.
Yeah, I'll share an image with you here. This is the black light tapestry of the golem. Do you have admin privileges, Timothy?
I do not on this one.
Okay, Pops, if you'll share my screen. But this is my golem.
Oh yeah, sure, man.
On the black light tapestry. Well, I freaking love swamp monsters.
Yeah.
So a chance to do the Heap and give it a new, a refined look, shall we say, the heap is the progenitor, the precursor to Swamp Thing and Man Thing. So I would love a chance to really do that character. And then I've got a couple of people that want me to pencil some work for them, which I find very flattering and gratifying. So I don't know what will be next on the drawing board after volume 2. I'm going to repencil volume 2 before I do anything else. So I don't know is the answer to that question.
Gotcha. I always wonder about that. And I forgot to mention something kind of interesting. You might think this is cool. One of the ways, actually probably the main way that I got into making comics, I sort of backed into it. And here's what happened. I have a cousin who is a director for, well, it was Nickelodeon at the time. They're not really doing their thing anymore for animated series, but he worked on a couple of animated TV shows, Little Bill, and he worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 90s version. He's a director, my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, hey, man, we need some script writers. And I worked on a couple of interstitials. And in those days, you could submit what they call a pitch. And it's a short synopsis of a series you want to make. Mm-hmm. And so my first pitch that I made was for this robot super team called Socket, right? And it was kind of a comedy. It was sort of like the Transformers in a way, but like funnier and a little bit like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mm-hmm. And it never got picked up. I never had too much success with it, but it was my first experience writing a script.
Right.
And anyway, when I started to make comics, that was the first title we made, and actually made 3 issues of that book. And
nice.
Well, thanks, man. And it wasn't, that was in the days before Kickstarter, when you would just make your book and then you would take it to conventions and trying to get people to notice it and so forth.
And pay for that printing out of your pocket.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. And in those days, by the way, I was giving them away. I wasn't selling them because you're trying to get people to notice your work, you see.
Yeah.
And now I never made a dime off that series, and I'm probably well in the hole with it. But on the other hand, that's how I learned to make comics. And
right, exactly.
It was a little bit of kind of like my college, I guess you'd say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you get a graduate course, particularly when you're coming out of your own pocket.
Right. And as I'm fond of saying, man, I did about everything wrong you could have done.
Yes, and I've been there, done that. Like there are some panels or some pages from my early work that I go, oh, sweet Jesus, I'm glad nobody can find these, because nobody's perfect and everybody starts somewhere. They can't all be winners. Is this pile over my shoulder here of canvases? That's what that's called. They can't all be winners. Those are paintings that are never going to see the light of day. I will paint over them. Same thing for every drawing you do can't be, a masterpiece. So you just do the best you can with what you got.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're close to wrapping this thing up here, time-wise, particularly since I'm starving and I want to go eat.
Roger that. Well, to the viewers, I want to say, please check out Pariah, Blood and Mud. It's coming March 3rd. Looking forward to the latest creation from Doc Blalock. Man, what a pleasure talking to you, Doc.
Same. Now, I'm going to play the trailer one more time here, but I want you to pay attention to the very first image that comes up. It's a portrait of Elizabeth. And my reference photo was of an actual person that I know. But Jennifer Connelly must have been on my mind because this is Jennifer Connelly. So I'll play it and you look at it and we'll come back and you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
pretty cool. Definitely a Jennifer Connelly vibe.
When she was young, she was the sexiest woman alive. So I've been completely unable to separate Elizabeth from her, other than there's a little bit of Alana Miles in there, and some of her outfits in the book are very Stevie Nicks. So, yeah.
I just want to make a quick comment. Now that you showed that, I really see the noir vibe, and I dig that shading.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, Jeff and I will actually brainstorm together. When we worked together in the 90s, we didn't do anything resembling noir. It was traditional superhero stuff. So we'll have to get together and make sure that's something he's comfortable doing, but I'm pretty confident he can handle it. So on that note, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Timothy a lot, because interviewing myself would have sucked. And I look forward to having you on my show, Timothy, so we can talk about your creations. And I look forward to hanging out on your channel, and we can do some music stuff too.
It's going to be fun. I'm already looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, I want to thank the chat as always. Without the chat, there's no reason to even bother being here. Thank you, Timothy, for helping out. I really appreciate it. I'm sure Pops is grateful. He was having technical difficulties up until 2 minutes before showtime. So we're really glad you could be here.
Glad to.
And with that, Pops, play us out of here.
In a world where creatures of myth and legend exist, a covert task force is charged with keeping humanity safe from supernatural threats. And when young Nancy Moon stumbles into the eternal battle between good and evil, she finds... Oh my God, will you shut up? What's happening? Agent Beckett here. Aren't you tired of stuff like that? Want something different? Roll the tape. Whoops. Sorry about that. That's a song I'm writing for my ex. Okay, here we go. Yeah, that's more like it. Alrighty. Welcome to the world of the mythicals. We have it all. Monsters. Magic. Government agents. He's the strong silent type. This guy. Ugh, gross, dude. Get some kind of cream or something. Lots of 90s style action. Pew pew pew. And that strong female lead alluded to earlier. Not to mention a dashing field commander with a great sense of fashion. Look at those glasses. South River Studios presents The Mythicals, Issue 1. Buy it, if you dare. Ugh, will you can it already? How'd you get free? Now beat it before I lose my cool. So what are you waiting for? Sign up today. Like right now.
Sign up today on Indiegogo.
podcast, it's critical blast.
How do you end this thing? How do you put the where's the brakes on this bus? I forgot.
Jazz hands. Jazz hands. Have a good
night.
Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals. Every month,